परमार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Gurubhyo Namaha. We will continue with chapter 3 Karma Yoga and verse number 34. The translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. This is a very important verse, so I thought we will spend time on this, just this one sloka. Verse number 34, and the next sloka also we will take that individually. Indriyasya ardhe ragadvesha vyavastitau tayoha na vasam agachet tau hi asya paripanthinau. Here is the English translation. The attachment and aversion of each sense are located in the object of that sense. Let no man come under their sway, for both indeed are enemies besetting his path. Again, the attachment and aversion of each sense are located in the object of that sense. Let no man come under their sway, for both indeed are enemies besetting his path. So here there are three important keywords. The attachment and aversion are located in the object of that sense. let no man come under their sway, because both are enemies besetting his path. Before we proceed further, let us recap verse number 33. Creatures follow their own nature. Even the enlightened man acts according to his own nature. What can restraint accomplish? And so here Bhagavan in detail has brought out the knowledge that freedom from bondage is gained in a natural manner. Bhagavan denies the validity of control on the path of enlightenment. He advises Arjuna to take things easily and to not even strain to follow this teaching also. Why is it natural? Because the natural tendency of the mind is towards greater happiness, and it will inevitably find contentment in that supreme transcendental bliss consciousness. And when it finds that contentment, then it will naturally rise above the attachment, which is the basis of bondage. And so Bhagavan says, it is not necessary to use restraint, and it is only necessary to raise the consciousness. So simply raise the level of one's consciousness by the experience of being. And again, Bhagavan reminds that the natural seat of bondage does not lie within the mind or the senses, which alone could be influenced by restraint. So this attachment or the seat of bondage is located outside in the region of the object of experience, and therefore non-attachment cannot be gained by restraining the mind or senses or keeping them away from activity, and not doing any activity. Finally, Bhagavan says this state of non-attachment is gained by only realizing the self and by realizing its separateness from activity. And he clearly says there is no other way. And all creatures must follow their own nature. So if all creatures follow their own nature, then they must be engaged in activity according to their own level of consciousness. Now Bhagavan continues in verse 34, and he says the attachment and aversion of each sense are located in the object of that sense, and let no man come under their sway, for both indeed are enemies besetting his path. Here Bhagavan points out again that all is well and wisely set in the nature. Let everything remain in its place. The attachment and aversion of each sense are located in the object of that sense, and let them remain in that field, and let the field of self remain free from them. Again, let them remain in that field, and the self remain free from them. Now, even the idea of restraint engages the mind in the objects of the senses. Even if the mind thinks that there should be some restraint, and just in order to forget them, the mind continues to think of those objects. And as soon as the mind comes in contact with the object through the senses, it is influenced by attachment or aversion, the raga or dvesha, which is present in the object. So Bhagavan is saying It is wrong to think in terms of abstinence from the activity of experience as the means of gaining a state of permanent freedom from attachment and aversion, because it is not physically possible to remain without activity at all times. So again, it is not physically possible to remain without activity at all times. So just thinking that you will abstain from the activity of experience will not allow you to gain a state of permanent freedom from attachment and aversion, the raga and dvesha. So here the crux of the teaching is realize being in its fullness, realize it as separate from activity, and this will automatically maintain the self as aloof from attachment or aversion in the midst of all activity and in the presence of all objects of the senses. In the last verse, Bhagavan asked Arjuna not to follow the way of restraint, and in this verse he is saying to not come under their sway, because both indeed are enemies besetting his path. This leads to a remarkable conclusion in the following verse. Here ends the essence of verse 34, chapter 3, Karma Yoga, translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Now I will add a few words. This is a very important verse. Here the words raga and dvesha are much more than simple like and dislike. They are likes which cause attachment, and they are dislikes which bring aversion, even hatred. And they are both enemies because they oppose evolution and they bring unhappiness. And so one should not fall prey to them or come under their sway. And this is what Bhagavan is saying. It is important to understand this in more detail and more clearly about these ragadveshas. This attachment and aversion are not there in the self, in the pure self. They are not there. In the subtlest aspects of the relativity, we know there are the gunas, and so these likes and dislikes are expressed with reference to every sense object depending on the gunas. Even from very early childhood, one has many likes and dislikes, and these many likes and dislikes are expressed indiscriminately. One tends to entertain whatever one likes and then discards whatever one doesn't like. So the individual nature of the individual nature is based on the gunas, and the nature of every single individual in the world is constituted of his own vasanas. And these vasanas manifest as his inherent tendencies and inclinations, his distinct likes and dislikes, his particular choices and preferences. Because these vasanas manifest in you from the very birth, so from a very early age you start showing distinct inclinations towards every sense object. So hence the likes and dislikes are due to the Prakriti, that is the nature of the gunas, and the vasanas, which are the expressions of these gunas. So you see these likes and dislikes in reference to every sense object, whether it is the sound, touch, form or color, taste or smell. Adi Shankara says that karma, the prarabdha karma, plays a role in expressing these ragadveshas. And one sees that even from childhood onwards, one picks up a lot of likes and dislikes unknown to oneself. One sees that the ragadveshas are there, extending in all spheres, whether it is related to people, food, culture, traditions, countries of origin, and even religious beliefs. But these strong likes and dislikes amounting to attachment and aversion, including hatred, and can destroy one's life, one's relationships, oppose one's evolution, and especially for a seeker, it will be a hurdle to gain enlightenment. Here it is important to understand that one has no control over these many likes and dislikes or the ragadveshas, nor can one apply restraint and control, because the mind will even get more attached to this idea of attachment or aversion. When one is under the spell of these ragadveshas, then one does not know what to do, what is not to be done, and what is to be avoided. And in this way, ragadveshas become obstacles. In the worst scenario, the whole life becomes guided by these ragadveshas. You keep being pulled in these two different directions of attachment and aversion. You keep doing things to which you are attracted and to which you are attached, whether it is people, places, careers, relationships, so many things, whether it is even religion, and you keep avoiding and pulling away from things that you do not like and you have an aversion to. And so this way of living greatly harms one's mental and spiritual well-being. And also those who possess strong likes and dislikes experience continuous fluctuations of pleasure and pain. And the mind remains agitated and not settled and peaceful because of these constant likes and dislikes or the ragadveshas. So how to deal with them? As Bhagavan has described in the previous verses, it is better to not come under their sway. It is better if the mind is engaged in the pursuit of happiness, in the bliss consciousness. It is better for the mind to experience the being and knowing that no ragadveshas exist there. It is better to develop established intellect. That means this intellect, the buddhi, is established in the being and knows how to discriminate what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, and what is dharmic and adharmic. That means what is supporting the nature or violating the nature. Definitely, when one is rising in consciousness, then naturally the mind is not under the sway of the senses. And once the mind is not under the sway of the senses, then the senses lose interest in the sense objects. That means indirectly the mind is losing interest in the sense objects. And fundamentally all these ragadveshas are related to the sense objects. And the ragadveshas are not in the senses or in the mind. They are outside. And that is why Bhagavan says, let them be in their field, in that field, and you remain the being. And gradually these ragadveshas will change. But in the meanwhile, on a practical level, one should know how to deal with them on a daily basis. So here it is very important to understand, to be able to discriminate what is dharma and what is adharma, and what is proper and what is harming. That means something should not be harming you or another. It should not be jeopardizing your relationships, your career, or your life. And learn to discriminate what is it that can be peaceful, harmonious, and evolutionary. Since one cannot control these ragadveshas, you cannot drive them away just like that. So the most important thing to decide is, you do what is to be done and you try to avoid what is not to be done. And here your will come into force, because you have the independent will. There is no need to control the mind or control the thoughts or control the ragadveshas, but you, because of your independent will and because of this discrimination of the established intellect, then you decide what is good for you, what is conducive for your happiness, and you make a decision whether to go with them or not go with them. Everyone understands ethics of what is good and bad and what is right and wrong, but a karma yoga is much more than the ethics, because in karma yoga we see the self and the activity being separate. So it is important that one continues to transcend and keep rising in consciousness and rise above the sway of these senses and sensory objects, and use your intellect, your established intellect, to determine which raga, that means which of your liking is useful, how to follow it and how to fulfill it, and following the norms of the dharma, the rules of the dharma and the rules of the land, and finally rise above the ragadveshas, because the ragadveshas are the greatest impediment for somebody who is seeking liberation. In this context, I would like to share a small experience. When I first arrived in Tirumala, having lived in US for 35 years, in very quiet surroundings and clean surroundings, the ashram surroundings and the environment started bothering me a little. The lack of awareness or the civic sense, lack of proper cleanliness, and the noise pollution and unnecessary disturbance, and even the quality of the food started bothering me. I even started thinking whether I would be able to really stay in India and continue with the tapas. Because in general, most of the ashrams are like this. Most of the environments don't have that much of awareness. So this was very early on, I just was there, I think less than a month in the ashram, and it was winter months. So I would go out for a walk, and then that morning I saw a very aged yogi, maybe in his 90s, just sitting on a stone. He was sitting with his eyes closed and just seemed like he was sunbathing. He was least perturbed with whatever was going on around him. There was some traffic, and there were some animals and some workers shouting around. Just looking at him brought so much of calmness and peace into my being. So the next 3-4 days, every morning when I was taking the walk, I would stop at that spot where he was sitting there and just stand there, just looking at him and watching him. And I was hoping that he would look at me and make a small conversation. So I made it a practice to take some fruit with me and a little bit of fresh cow milk. And I would place it at his feet, but he would not look at me. Then around the 5th or 6th day, after my everyday visits, he slowly looked at me and then asked me in a very soft voice as to what I was doing here. And I told him I came to do my sadhana, my tapas. And he asked me, "Do you know what is tapas?" And I kept silent. Then he said, in tapas, 2 important things are needed. One is very intense desire to know the God, and the other is to be udasina. And he said, be udasina to everything around you. Udasina means being indifferent, being neutral, being not associated. And he added another word. He said, be udasina and be tatastha. That is not minding attitude. There are so many meanings to these 2 Sanskrit words, udasena and then the tatastha, that you can say it is asanga, not being associated, unclutched. But the most important thing is being indifferent and being neutral and not being judgmental. So just in 2 simple words, he said, you came for tapas, you be the being. And why are you concerned about what is going on around? The samsara has its own business. It has to carry on with its own activities. And you remain as the self. This was the greatest and most important lesson that I have learned in Tirumala. Then I saw that this yogi and the many sannyasis around were actually practicing this. It was a part of their sadhana, being the udasena and the tatastha. They would not respond to the many happenings around or the sensory objects around. They would just remain indifferent. In reality, the practice of this became so easy for me. It was just on that subtle level in the awareness that the world has to go on the way it is, and everybody is acting in their own gunas, and just not mind what is happening around and be the self. There was no effort on my part, but that little shift helped me stay a very enjoyable sadhana and life in both in Tirumala and in the Himalayas. When Maharshi Ji was asked by someone, what should one do despite meditation, despite following all the protocols in the sadhana, that one has negative thoughts and some things are around are bothering, then Maharshi Ji also said the same thing. He said, be indifferent and take your mind to something more pleasant or a higher ideal, so that one doesn't have to dwell on it. Now for me, at this point, the greatest ideal was being the being and being in that ocean of bliss. Now I will end here. Jai Gurudev. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu.